Hello friends and welcome to this video on plot. Plot is a very simple term known by everyone and there are many things related to plot that sometimes people find difficult. Therefore, this term becomes very paradoxically enigmatic. So let's talk about plot. When I went looking for the etymology of the word, I found out that the word does not go far back. Because when Aristotle talked about it, the Greek term was mythos, what we call now as myth or story. Later on, that mythos was translated into plot, and that originates the use of that kind of use of plot originates in around 1640s. Now, what is mythos according to Aristotle? It's a simple arrangement of events. That's how he defined it. Arrangement of events. Now, that arrangement of events, which he called mythos or we know as plot, is the soul of tragedy, according to Aristotle. So, then there is a difference between story and plot. Let's begin with that. A story is also an arrangement of events, just as plot is an arrangement of events. But story is strictly a chronological arrangement of events. So, Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. In this case, event 1, Jack and Jill, they decide to go on. Then they go up the hill, event 2. Then they reach at the top of the hill, 3. Then one part of the story is that Jack falls down and breaks his crown. Okay. And part B, and Jill comes tumbling after. But then everything happens in a set chronological order. So you see in this case, the actual arrangement, which is the plot in the story, the final arrangement, and the chronological arrangement, that is the story, are one and the same, which happens in many cases, but that is not in every case. And we are going to talk about cases in which chronological is not equal to the choice of the author or the narrator and is not reflected in narrative structure. We'll talk about structure a little later. So there are cases when events are not chronologically arranged, and then we can differentiate between story and plot. For example, who does not know about Hamlet, right? Prince Hamlet of Denmark. Now, you may or may not have read the text because some of my audience, members of my audience, are also from undergraduate classes. So don't worry about that. I'll tell you the chronological story, a very short story, very simplistic story. Once upon a time, there was a king named Hamlet. He had a brother named Claudius. Claudius murdered the king and married his queen, that's Gertrude. King Hamlet and Gertrude had a son named Prince Hamlet, of course. Prince Hamlet does not like the thing of the hasty marriage of his mother's with Claudius. He does not like Claudius also. He suspects something but is not sure. But then the ghost of his father, King Hamlet, comes and tells him everything and asks him to take revenge. And then Hamlet goes on procrastinating and delaying and delaying and delaying and until he is finally forced by the series of events to take his revenge. Therefore, he murders Claudius, and in the process, he also is killed, and his mother is killed, and so on. So, for so many dead bodies at the end. This is the general, very simplistic, pathetic in my telling because Shakespeare did it. But still, this is in a nutshell the plot. Now you see, the story. Now you see the actual treatment. Shakespeare's treatment begins when the king is already dead. The wedding has taken place, and Hamlet is already in clutch of some sort of at least mild melancholia. And then there are two persons who see the ghost for the first time, spot the ghost, and then when we meet them, they have called Hamlet's friend, best friend Horatio, to observe what happens, and the ghost comes there, and then so on and so forth. So you see, this is not the actual beginning of the story. The chronological beginning of the story is at least where King Hamlet, the events mentioned in this plot, where King Hamlet meets the old Fortinbras of Norway and beats him. So that is the actual, the first chronological event that is mentioned according to the storyline, according to the time arrangement of storyline, that great King Hamlet defeats old King of Norway, and everything begins, so on and so forth, according to chronology. But according to the plot, the real arrangement of events, as far as the playwright Shakespeare is concerned, he begins with the spotting of the ghost, and even before that, he begins with the meeting of sentries at the ramparts. So you see, past events, they are then related in flashbacks, which is a technique. We'll talk about that later sometime. So now you see that Jack and Jill, simple chronological arrangement of events. Hamlet, what an example to take in comparison to Jack and Jill, but still, Hamlet, not so simple, and a copybook example of how a playwright, a writer, a narrator may choose not to follow, and many a times does choose not to follow the chronological arrangement. But why? Why would someone choose not to follow the simple straight line of chronological occurrences, right? Think of it. Me, as a storyteller, or you as a storyteller, put yourself in the shoes of a real storyteller, then think of it. For example, the story of Lord Ram is known by everyone. Now, Amish chose to tell that story in a different manner, and he told that story wonderfully in 4 parts. Now, when you go into his telling of the story, it will not be a chronological arrangement of events, neither would be a straight line storytelling. It's his choice. He thought that his way of storytelling will be more interesting for the reader, more rewarding, for more aesthetically pleasing for the reader. So the author chooses to tell the story in a specific manner, chooses not to follow the chronological sequence, but create an internal logic of the storyline, which is translated into the final plot. Okay, now from story to plot. By the way, there are some technical terms. For example, story is called histoire in French, fabula in by Russian formalists, and plot is called sujet. Sujet in Russian, or sujet in English if you want. Mythos in Greek, plot, as you know totally. So there is a difference between fabula and sujet, between histoire. Sometimes the term récit is used, but let's not use the term récit for as an equivalent of plot. Let it be. So story is equal to fabula is equal to histoire, and plot is equal to mythos is equal to sujet. Okay, let's do it like this. And remember, the simplest form, Jack and Jill went up the hill, and the more complex form is Hamlet. Now we'll talk a little bit about the elements of a plot, and then we'll go to the structure. Fine, because without talking about elements, it's difficult to talk about structure. So elements first. Elements of a plot were first given by, or most famously given by, and you will find the same in M.H. Abrams, by Gustav Freytag. Gustav Freytag, he gave the 5 element structure, and it's called Gustav's pyramid because it's a triangular kind of cross section in which there is one side or one arm towards the left will be called the rising action. Then it reaches the acme or the climax, the Jack and Jill went up the hill kind of point, the highest point in the tension, and then the falling action. So the rising and the falling action, and this the climax. Okay, but then you suddenly reach the rising action. That's not practically possible. So you make it like this. This part is the exposition, the introduction, the opening up, the setting, introduction to the characters, the introduction to the place, some introduction to the action. Now the rising action begins, reaches the climax, the falling action, and then finally what is called catastrophe in tragedy, or denouement, the French term denouement. It comes from de-knotting, if you want, so opening the knots, opening the complications and solving them. Denouement from any kind of drama or story. So Freytag's pyramid, which is also called the dramatic arc, if you want. So we've got these elements: the exposition or introduction, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the catastrophe or denouement, whatever you want. 5 points that we have. Now, when you look at these 5 elements of a plot, there are many ways of constructing these parts or elements of a plot, and there is no one set way. Now, there is a specific story. For example, the story of Jack and Jill. The story of Jack and Jill may be, spliced and rearranged into a form of either straight or complex plot. Now, plots may have structures. For example, the famous 5-act structure, the famous 3-act structure. So plots, they have their structure, a kind of template. So there was once, for example, as far as Elizabethan plays are concerned, 5-act structure. The more modern structure, 2 or 1-act structure, even scene wise structure. So depending on which template, because this is the modern times and we know what templates are, so structure may be taken as a template, and story may be taken as all the material that you have collected, the chronological arrangement of events, the raw material, if you want. So you've got the raw material, that is the story. You process the raw material, and then you try to find out the parts that will be most beneficial or most interesting for your audience, and then you take all those elements out of the story and you plan to use narrative techniques to finally build a plot, and you build a plot. So for example, you had n number of number of elements in a story chronologically arranged. You took, for example, n by 2 number of elements for the plot that you built, and that plot, those n by 2 elements are now structured into, for example, 3 parts. So you took 1/3 or 1/4 for exposition, then 1/4 of n by 2 for the rising action, then a little bit at the climax, then maybe you took falling action some more time, so half of it falling action, and so on and so forth. You see, so story is the biggest chunk probably, plot is smaller part of it, what you deem to be the most important, the most interesting, if you want. And then you take the plot, the elements of that plot, and then arrange that into the template, the one structure that your audience understands. In case of novel, that would be a concern of whether you are breaking the novel into chapters, then chapters are arranged in parts or volumes in the Victorian times, or you will go directly into it and present 2 or 3 characters, stream of consciousness kind of thing, so on and so forth. So then plot is what the author decides to present, and the way the author decides to present, that is individual dependent. But structure is a genre slash market driven. Structure is a kind of universal, and a story is a kind of very specific, and plot is some kind of intermediate stage between story and structure. I'm not saying that the whole story cannot be converted into a plot. It can be. We have seen Jack and Jill, the whole thing. And I'm not saying that the whole story and all elements taken in the plot can be directly translated into structure. Very well. But when you translate the plot into structure, you will have to follow a certain arrangement, a certain set of conventions. And that certain set of conventions gives you a framework. And that framework will then be fleshed with the elements of the plot. So elements of the plot, they have material of story, and these elements are then put into the framework or skeletal structure, metaphorically speaking. So story, plot, and narrative or dramatic structure, these are 3 different things, and it has to be understood. There are places where structure also includes setting, but then I've already talked about exposition. It contains the introduction to the characters and setting. So of course, I have mentioned settings already, that is a part of the structure. Now I'll stop here because I've almost reached 15 minutes. I'll stop here. There are a couple of things that I need to talk with you, but then I'll talk about that later. If you have any queries, if you have some confusion left, please do put that in the comment box. And one more thing, I hope that you've liked this video. If you have liked this video, then please click at the like button down there. If you want to be connected, stay connected by all means. There is an option of subscription. You can subscribe. You're very, very welcome. Be a part of the team, and with your suggestions, and with, if you want something specific, if you want me to cover a specific topic, do tell me. I'll do that for you. It's lovely to, to be able to talk about literature, to be able to talk about literary terms with good people like you. So stay in touch. Other descriptions are down there in the description box. There's a Telegram channel. You can join that. Uh, yeah, that's all. Try to understand the plot. Do your googling also a little. Go to MH Abrams if you want, and then we may meet some other time too if you want. And you put in the comment box that you want to discuss some more about plot. Although I do have some more content that I'll bring to you in the next video. So thank you very much. Thank you.